Hi folks, welcome to today's edition of our videocast, My Life with Robert Burns. We're pleased you could join us. I'm Douglas Mackenzie, and joining me in our conversation with today's guest is Jim Thompson. Hi Jim.
Hi Douglas, hi everybody.
Jim and me are friends and colleagues from Newcomen at Burns Club. So, what we're going to do today, we're using Zoom to have a conversation with one of our friends from around the Burns world. And we thought you might be interested in listening into our conversation. Cronies, our guest today really needs no introduction, as he's one of the most respected authorities on Burns in Scotland, if not worldwide. Cronies everywhere, to tell us about his life with Robert Burns, please welcome Hugh Farrell.
Hello Douglas, and hello Jim.
Hi Hugh. Thanks for agreeing to be a guest on My Life with Robert Burns. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, certainly, Jim. Certainly, Douglas and Jim. Well, I was born in Kilwinning, but that was only because my mother was there at that time, in 1943. And she brought me home to Cumnock, Grey Street in Cumnock. It was well named. It was quite a grey street, in fact. But it was a great street, full of wains, so plenty of folk to play with. So a kind of overcrowded house. There were 3 wains and mother and father in 1 bedroom, but we managed fine. And as I say, plenty happening in the streets. If a car came into the street, it was a big event. But the insurance collection man, he come round in a car. But we discovered if you press this wee thing in the wheel, you hear sss. So I think he'd blow up his tires every time we left Grey Street. We just liked the noise. Then the Borough Care come round in the winter. This street was in a hill, and we had great time sledging in the winter. But the Borough Care would come round, and there'd be 2 men standing in the back of it, shoveling ash on the road. Then we were out of the brushes, sweeping the ash back off the road, and away with the sledges again. So great times, and better without the motor car. You can play in the street then. So I started school when I was 4, but 2 months short of my 5th birthday, and I hated it. My big sister was in the playground when I came out for the first playtime ever, and she says, "Did you like it?" And I burst into tears, and I says, "She bawls." So, primary 1 teacher bawling in the first hour. Mind you, there were 52 in the class all through the primary. And she retired that year. My brother blamed me for her retirement, but she was a grey-headed woman. So I hated the school. Right through the school, I hated it. And it was my own fault, because I worked in the classroom, but I never looked at a book outside the classroom, which was crassly stupid. I learned in later life. But in spite of that, I did no too bad. In fact, in primary 7, the first 8 in the class went into 1A at Cumnock Academy, and I was 9th. So I missed 1A with a whisker. And I sometimes wonder if I had got into 1A, it might have G'd me up a bit. And I might just have tried a bit harder, but there you go. So then I left the school when I was still 14. My birthday fell during the holidays, so I was out of school. But I'd already applied for a job with the Coal Board. I was very interested to hear Bobby Jess on here, and how he was an apprentice electrician at Barony. I'd always wanted to be an apprentice electrician with the Coal Board. So I sat a wee exam, which put me through to the interview. So I got the interview, but I never got the job. So that's me deflated now.
Yeah. Just like these tyres.
Just like tires, yes. Well, they were maybe more deflated than me, I don't know. But I was then advised by my mother and father, get yourself into Ayr Road to the Labour Exchange and get yourself a job. So round I went and I was interviewed, and then I got a letter to take to the Scottish Special Housing Association. So up I went and down the Gasworks Bray, and I got an interview, and I got a job as a painter with SSHA. Oh, that was fine. All right, I'll be a painter. So I had to wait till the official letter came in and the indentures to sign. When I bumped into Geordie McCall, here we come to Ballyhasty now. Geordie had a plumber's business in Cumnock. And he said to me, why are you not at the skill? I said, I've left the skill. Why are you not working? Oh, I've not got a job yet, but I'm starting a job. What job are you starting? I'm going to be a painter with SSHA. You'd be better being a plumber, he says. I'll see you on Monday morning. So I was going to be a plumber now. So I rolled up on the Monday morning and met the boys. Well, there was Geordie and there was a tradesman. And there was a 5th year apprentice, and there was a 3rd year apprentice, and there was me. Although the 5th year apprentice, he was working as a tradesman. So everything was going fine until Geordie says to the 3rd year apprentice, by the way, your day release at Ayr College will just be occurring every 2nd year now. And Hugh will be going in the alternate years. That didn't please him. And for that minute on, that boy was trying to get rid of me, even doing physical abuse.
Oh dear.
Which the tradesman just watched. However, the day came when we were in a woman's back garden and we were piling up the slates for the roofing job. And he started on me again. But the good wife, she had a washing out. So I just grabbed the stretcher and I attacked both him and the tradesman with this clothes stretcher. And they run like bats out of hell out the front gate. And that was the end of the abuse. But I was about 7 months there when the Coal Board were advertising again, apprentice electricians. Now I had started going to night classes, starting engineering towards a higher national. So this time I sailed through the interview and I finished up at Barony Colliery, as did Bobby Jess. So I was there for, well, that was the end of 1958. I was there until 1963, early 63, with the disaster at Barony in October of 62, when 4 men were killed when the 2 shafts collapsed. And the tradesmen were scattered to the 4 winds. The apprentices, they had a duty to keep them on, indentured apprentices. So it would be about February of 1963, I was sent to Knockshinnagh Castle Colliery. And I discovered, it was like being in the Amazon and discovering a new tribe, new Cumnock folk. But I thought they were marvellous, absolutely marvellous. I think Cumnock folk were kind of townies, whereas New Cumnock, which is a wee bit more rural, folk more interested in nature. And I hesitate to say it, but maybe more honest. I mean, you could leave your bits outside your locker at Knockshinnagh. Whereas at Barney, if you did that, well, again, one man, he couldn't understand how he was wearing out his boots as quickly. I knew there was a guy in the other shift, double shifting the boots. So that when you hammed in out shinner. And if you dropped a tool or lost a tool, it was handed in. So it was under the watchful eye of Johnny Potton. And under the watchful eye of Dan Gilmer or Kelly. Did you ever come across Kelly? All right. Well, he was the shop steward, and he made me the apprentice's shop steward. Then when I went to further education, I screwed the nut. There was none of this nonsense, and I studied very hard. And I can remember the first meeting I had with the manager, Mr. Dewar. Kelly thought he was going into a meeting with him over some grievance. He thought he'd get me in for the experience. So in I went. Now, I just sat over the Ordinary National Certificate, and it's the best year I ever had. And I was first in the class, and I hadn't a mark below about 85%. So I sat into the meeting, and Dewar, I think, to try and put me in the back foot, says, all right, he says, I've got the results from the college. Well, I'd already had them. He didn't know that. I've got your results for the college. Do you want to hear them? That'd be all right, Mr. Dewar. And he says, but don't expect you'll have done very well. The clever boys all go to the Barney. All right. And he was as sick as a pig. His son was in the same class as me, and he didn't do too well at all. So I'd screwed the nut at last. So my time was out at Knockshinnagh, and I decided I wasn't getting enough overtime there, and I was going with Mary. We were going to be married in 1965.
And was Mary from Cumnock as well?
She was from Cumnock, and she was from Garallan House.
Oh, yeah.
And if I had just known about Garallan House, what I know now, knowing then, I'd have been in heaven and in Garallan House. Because that was the home of Patrick Douglas.
Yeah.
For whom Robert Burns was going to work in Jamaica. And I know that Robert Burns visited Patrick Douglas. Now, it may have been doing in the Village Inn in Dumfries Arms, or I think more likely it might have been at Garallan House. I'd like to think it was there.
Aye.
So I moved to Killach. I had more overtime. So we gathered 2 or 3 sons together, and we married November 1965. And I'd noticed at Killach, I wasn't getting much chance of promotion, I don't think. They were closing the wee pits to man up Killach. So you had chief electricians and foremen losing their jobs but coming to Killach. And they're filling the jobs that the younger guys might have got up into. So I decided to go for English Gold, and I moved down to the East Midlands with Mary. Within 3 weeks of our marriage, we were off to Nottinghamshire. We were there for about 1.5 years, during which time the inevitable happened, and our first daughter was born in May 1967, Gillian. And we came up to Scotland before she was born, and I came back to Barony. But I only waited there 6 months before getting a job out of the pits. I decided, too unhealthy, wasn't it for me? So I went to Scottish Cables, got a job in the technical department. And I was in the supertension side, where we were manufacturing the 132 kV cables. And sloshing about testing them with 170,000 volts. So between that and working in the materials laboratory, I was getting on fine. But we were struggling for cash.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a good enough wage. But in those days, you get a job which was confirmed after a year with some companies.
Aye.
So I was going into permanent staff after a year. So we're still in that first year, and I thought, I'll get a rise at the end of the year. We'll be better off next year. So, yes, I went to permanent staff, got a rise, but I was also compelled to join the company pension scheme, and the contributions were greater than the rise. So year two were worse off. So I moved back into maintenance with Cameron Ironworks through in Livingston.
Yeah.
That was a phenomenal experience with the biggest power press in the world. A power press, 30,000 tons. Making, we're extruding stainless steel pipe with a 7-inch wall thickness. So very interesting, and I learned an awful lot there. We're also doing pressings for Rolls-Royce for Jet. Now, Edward Heath came to power in 1970, and it lame duck policy. Any companies that are lame ducks, well, they're lame. Don't be expecting the government to prop you up.
Yeah.
Now, the government then cancelled a jet aircraft, fighter jet, and we were doing all the work for component parts for that jet aircraft. So Rolls-Royce was going bust. So Cameron Ironworks was going bust, and 300 redundancies. Well, I volunteered, confident that I'll get a job. So I left Cameron Ironworks on the Friday night, and I was working for Enfield Cables in Cambuslang on the Monday morning. Again, I'd experienced a cable manufacturer with Scottish Cables, and I became technical manager with Enfield Cables until about 5 years later, the warning bells were ringing that the plant might close.
Yeah.
And I was enticed across to the Crown Agents for overseas governments and administrations. The Enfield Cables had me down in London, coaxing me to go to London. Mm-hmm. And no, I'd no wish to go to London. So I went to Crown Agents, and as an inspecting engineer, going into plants, Crown Agents procured equipment for Commonwealth countries.
Yeah. And
they sent their inspectors in to ensure that all the materials were to the correct standard. So I became their power cables expert. And in the beginning, it was fine. I'm working within daily travelling distance at the office in Glasgow. But then I had to look after a contract all of a sudden. I was 2 weeks a month in Workington.
Yeah.
I picked up another contract. I was 1 week a month in Romania. And then another one, I was 1 week a month in Poland. So there was the 4 weeks of the month, and I'm no home. So I complained about that, and they offered me 6 months in Canada. So if they'd offered me 7 months, my wife and family went with me. 6 went alone. So it says, you're joking.
No good.
You're joking. And I left there and I went to Perth. To a Morgan Crucible company. I was a works engineer and safety officer. So I'm back into engineering.
Right, so Hugh, you went to Perth, and what was the name of the crystal company? Morgan
Crucible.
Yeah. The only one I knew was Vesuvius Crucible.
Oh yes.
Was it at New Mills?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Well, when we've got you in Perth, we'll maybe move over a wee bit and start talking a bit about your interest in burns, because I think we need a separate second episode with you, Hugh. So we'll pick up the rest of your life story in the second episode. So Jim, do you want to start the conversation with Hugh about burns?
Quite simply, Hugh, what drew you to burns in the first place?
Well, my family drew me to burns. I mean, that merry day of the year began with Bark the Door and Frosty Wind, and with great parties. In fact, we'd parties 3 nights in a row every New Year, and there was an awful lot of sprinklings of burns in those parties. And my mother was a great burns fanatic, without ever joining a club, but she loved burns. My mother was brought up by her grandmother, who was born in 1841, just 7 years after Jean Armour died. And this just compressed everything. So I was brought up by a woman whose granny was born just 7 years after Jean Armour died. And that just lit the candle for me. And I was in Cumnock Youth Club as a teenager, and I attended my first burns supper in 1962. And I thought, this is great, just in the youth club. And in 1963, I proposed the toast to the lassies. And that was my career begun with burns. There was a wee hiatus after that, marriage, away to England, etc. And when I went to Enfield Cables to work, I moved to Stonehouse. And I'm now looking for a burns club. Then I read in the local paper, Stonehouse all the years burns club, meeting next Friday night, which was the first Friday in 1973. Meeting in the public hall. So I got a collar and tie on and walked down to the public hall. And I walked in and there's a dance. And I asked somebody, is this the burns club? No, this is the pigeon club. The burns club's up the stair. So I walked up the stair to the lesser hall and I just walked in, and it was a club that had 35 members. And welcome to open arms. Although you were supposed to have 2 folk proposing you, a proposer and a seconder to get in. They just says, come in. And I recited Tam O'Shanter that night. And the secretary, Dick Gibb, wonderful man, absolutely wonderful man. He came over at the end of the night with a wee slip of paper and he says, that's the suppers you're going to. And I just did it. So there are 18 suppers on the list. You'll be doing the readings. I says, right. So that was me. And I've got their membership card. And it's quite interesting because to join cost you £1. And your annual membership fee was 75 new pence.
Wow.
So, but a great club, now 35 members, and Dick Gibb's proud boast is we can populate 3 top tables in the same evening.
Wow, that's tremendous.
Now, in that club, there was no committee. There was a president, there was a secretary, and there was a treasurer. All the meetings were held with the entire club present. And the meeting was at the beginning of the night, and then you get into harmony. And you were expected to arrive with a different piece every month, be it a song or a poem. So that really was me submerged in burns. And 2 years later, 1975, I was president of the club. And I kind of made it a loose rule when I became president. We continue with all the business meetings are in the club nights, but I would hope that wouldn't go on for longer than 20 minutes. So I put a 20-minute limit on it, and we managed fine. So that was Stonehouse. Well,
before you move off Stonehouse, we need to get you to give us one of your pieces, seeing as you obviously learned so much when you were there.
Yeah. Well, we could look at A Boy is Welcome to His Love Begotten Daughter.
That would be excellent.
Title. Thou's welcome, Wayne. My shanter's for me if thoughts to thee or yet thy mammy shall ever daunting me or owe me, my sweet wee lady, or if I blush when thou shalt call me Tata or Daddy. Though now they call me fornicator, and tease my name and contraclator. The more they talk, I'm ken the better. E'en let them clash. An old wife's tongue's a feckless mater to gie and fatch. Welcome, my bonny sweet wee daughter. Though thou come here a wee on thought for, I know you're coming aye folk for both kirk and queer. Yet by my faith, you're no unrocked for, that I shall swear. Wee image in my bonny Betty, as faitherly a dote and kiss thee, as near and dear my heart I set thee, and was good will, as all the priests has seen me get thee, that's out of hell. God grant that thou may I inherit thy mother's looks and grace for merit, and thy peerth worthless daddy's spirit without his failings. It please me mair to see ye air it than stock at Maylands. For if thou be what I would hae thee, and tak this counsel I would gie thee, I'll never rue my trouble with thee, the cost nor shame it, but be a loving father to thee, and brag the name of it.
Well
Well
done.
done, you.
Excellent.
Well done, you.
Now, when people come to the museum, I like to give them that last verse, particularly if they're from the Midlands of England. Because many years ago, I read in a newspaper that a couple sued the local health board because they had a daughter. And I thought, pardon? Sued because you had a daughter? Where are you coming from? I read the article, the husband had had a vasectomy. I thought the case was misdirected and they should have been suing the milkman. Then I tell folks, those newspaper cuttings, what if that wee girl catches sight of these cuttings when she's a teenager? They didn't want me. They sued because I was born. And then I give them the cuttings that Robert Burns left for her, his wee lass, that last verse of that poem. He was so proud to have that daughter, a daughter who caused him far much more trouble than that wee lassie caused that couple. So Burns, to me, is such a fantastic person. And not just a poet. I mean, what's a poet? There's thousands of poets. Well, there's the poet, Burns. You know, poets can get words to rhyme. But to me, it's how Robert Burns said what Robert Burns said. Robert Burns had a message in all his poetry. Just fantastic human being. I can I'd like to read Maya Angelou, that great civil rights fighter. That woman who was so abused as a 7-year-old by her mother's boyfriend, she never uttered another word for about 5 years.
Yeah.
As a young girl walking the dirt tracks of Arkansas, I met with Robert Burns. He inspired me. His inspiration was humanitarianism. He was able to love human beings, and his imagination was vast. And how that draws me to Robert Burns, because that is Robert Burns in a nutshell. I'd say the international poet of humanity, in addition to being the national bard of Scotland. So just a phenomenal man.
Yeah, she was a great fan of Robert Burns.
Yes. She had a great hurley at the Dundonald Burns Club, of course, when she visited the cottage in 1996, the bicentenary of the death of Robert Burns. So there is some footage of the night she had at Dundonald, with Cliff Botcher being company and all the crazy guys. It's Cliff was quite a character. He phoned me one night and he says, "Could you stand in for me at a Burns supper?" I said, "Where is it?" He's doing it at Blair Juan, he says. "Oh, Blair Juan, right, aye." He says, "I can't go. I was supposed to be going, but I'm going to Egypt to a Burns supper." Now, he'd done the thing I would never do. If I tell somebody I'm coming to their Burns supper, it wouldn't matter the Queen of Sheba had asked me to go to another in the same day. I wouldn't be going. However, I says, "Well, what were you going to be doing?" "Oh, a couple of readings." "Fine." He says, "Somebody will phone you for News International." Well, I says, "Right." So the guy phoned me, News International. And he says, "I don't understand a couple of poems." "Oh, yes, we would also like you to give them auto memory." "All right, okay." And then the next phone call, "Could you also chair it?" "All right, okay." And then the next phone call, "Could you get us a pianist?" I said, "All right, okay." So we ended up, it was me and the singer and the pianist to do the Burns supper. And I walks in and there is those and such and so. It's a small gathering, about 24, with Donald Dewar and Jack McConnell and Henry McLeish and editor of the News of the World and so forth. However, the night went off fine. But the most memorable part for me was when Lord James came up and tapped me in the shoulder and says, announce an interval, please." And then he made the announcement, the ladies will go to the washroom and the men will go out and view the lodge. So we're all trooping out in this big grassy area. And this is the men's toilet. Next thing I know is there's peeing in the grass. And I turned around, I'm coming down the stairs for the front door, and I turned around and there's Dewar behind me. And he take one look at this and shot straight back in the door. After all, the editor of the News of the World's there. He wasn't going to be involved. But that was just a wee surprise I had at a Burns supper. It was very good. So when I went to Perth, I was still president of Stonehouse Burns Club.
Yeah.
I'm now looking for a Burns Club in Perth. And I couldn't find one. And then about 3 months later, I read, "Well, there's a meeting, Salutation Hotel. They're trying to resurrect Perth Burns Club."
And I'm going to stop you there, Hugh. I'm going to stop you there because that's the perfect place for us to stop. Right? So what we'll do is we'll wind this one down,
That's
and
fine.
then we'll start another one. Are you okay, Jim? You get time for another half hour?
Yeah, no bother.
And you're okay, Hugh, are you?
I'm okay.
Right. So you've arrived in Perth, Hugh, with both your career and with your tour of Burns clubs.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's the perfect place for us to finish this first instalment of My Life with Robert Burns with Hugh Farrell. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for spending time and telling us all about your life with Robert Burns. Hopefully we'll get another session with you sometime soon when we can hear the rest of the story. Thanks very much, Hugh.
It's been a pleasure, Douglas. Thank you.